Wow.
Puts it down.
Oh my God, Marvin Workman!
You say you're the king of this and you're the king of that. You're the king of dog shot.
Hitting some good shots on Tom here.
He's landing some big shots.
Best in the game. Best in the game. Woo! Look at
You think you can beat me in a boxing match, do you?
He's covering
Oh
up.
my God!
Boom!
Darce choke. Darce choke set up from Devin Stanley.
They're like the Spartans in 300. Teddy Atlas here. It's the New Line Podcast with Keith No and Elijah Thacker.
We're back, and today we are talking to a very interesting man, a scholar and a gentleman, UFC welterweight champion, first ever UFC welterweight tournament champion, the founder of Miletich Fighting Systems, and the host of the Conspiracy Farm podcast, Pat Miletich. How you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute honor to be talking to you. You know, you've been on Joe Rogan Experience. You've been on Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast. This is a huge step down for your career.
I love talking to people, especially people from Kentucky, brother.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. You know, we talked a little bit before we started recording. You know, you called a friend of mine's fight, Ken Beverly, for the LFA. You were talking pretty good about these Kentucky boys.
Well, they're tough. Number one, they're good people, spiritual people down in that region of the country. So yeah, I spent some time down in Inez as well, with some folks over there that are planting apple orchards and doing a bunch of work down there. And
really, Inez is just about 30 minutes from me.
Yeah, the Booth Energy guys, James Booth and his folks. And yeah, I love it, dude. I would move there in a heartbeat. I would move there in a heartbeat and find myself what you guys call a holler, and freaking just put a pole building back in the back and just live in there and grow my own food and do my own thing.
Oh, that's me. I'm just a holler boy, and you know, I work for. This is the New Line podcast. I'm with New Line Cagefighting. It's a primarily West Virginia based organization, and it's a lot of holler boys. We got guys, you know, working 16 hours a day in the coal mines and still trying to make a go of it fighting.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you something. This is something that I try to pay attention to. So can you see this in the skies above me? Yeah.
Some chemtrails going on.
You know, the people that, look at that one, goes all the way across the sky. There's, you know, they've been doing this to Iowa and the country for quite some time now. And at some point, it'd be nice if Americans would wake up and start pushing back on this, because they say they're spraying it. They say they're spraying it to keep the temperature of the globe down. But if you block the sun, it's tough to grow food. If you block the sunlight is needed for human beings to create vitamin D to keep your immune system strong, along with the heavy metal particulates that are settling into our soil and our water, ending up in every living thing, and it causes crop problems. The roots don't grow as deep, so they're vulnerable to drought. It's very damaging to soil and respiratory systems of living animals. And honeybees, the levels of aluminum alone in honeybees is so high that it's 70 times higher than what it takes to help create Alzheimer's in human beings. That's how bad that is.
That's unbelievable. So for people who don't know, what are they spraying? Like, what kind of chemicals are they spraying?
Silver iodide and aluminum particulates. And, you know, there's it's, you know, all people have to do if they think I'm crazy is do a Google search on weather modification companies and then research those. Look at the airplanes that they're using, all of it. It's all there for you, right in front of you. Then weather modification legislation in Washington, D.C. and your own state. Then after you're done researching that, then research what substances are being sprayed in the aerosols, and then research what those substances do to human health alone. You can dig into the soil health and everything else. And by the time you get done, you're going to ask yourself, Number one, it's pretty obvious what they're up to. Either they're complete idiots or they're absolutely trying to extinguish as many of us as possible. Period. End of story. There is no arguing.
Well, there's a lot of terrifying stuff going on right now. I haven't heard you talking about the train derailments all over the country yet. I haven't. And, these food processing plants burn into the ground all over the country. Like, what are your thoughts on that stuff?
Look, we could say it's all coincidence or whatever the situation is. No matter what, it's going to put dents in and cracks in the supply chain, right? Whether it's goods, whether it's food, whatever it is, it's causing problems, right? So, by coincidence, and a bunch of idiots are in control of running all this stuff, and it's just happening, happenstance, whatever. But either way, it's going to cause major issues. So I just tell people, have a good source of water, grow your own food, grow it organically or biologically if you can, and to stay healthy, because buying food from a lot of places, certainly restaurants, you don't know what's in the food that they're bringing in, right?
It's really interesting though, because the government places so many roadblocks in the way of like local farming and self-sustainability. I mean, you can't even collect rainwater in this country.
Well, at some point, you just have to look at them and go, you're going to have to get off my land, and you're going to need to go away. And if at some point, all of the attorneys and all the lawsuits and all the other stuff, that's all going to go away. That's all going to go away.
Well, until people stand up, the government's just going to keep growing. That's what they like to do. And
it's not even government that's the problem. It's the fact that most politicians are the highest paid whores on the planet, right? They're just slaves. They're absolutely slaves.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I heard you on a podcast, talking about getting MMA legalized and the battle that was.
Right.
And it's funny, it reminded me a lot of West Virginia, because I don't know if you know what, MMA wasn't legal in West Virginia until about 5 years ago.
Right.
And a guy named Butch Hiles, he was the first black belt in West Virginia. He was kind of leading that fight. He said on the podcast, I had him on here, and he said basically the exact same thing you did. They told him, we're not going to make this happen if it doesn't suit our financial interests.
That's what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to. That's what it always comes down to. Are they going to make money? So, it would be nice if we could all just pay them money and they could come over to our side and we could pay them money for healing the planet, right?
And, I really want to dive deep into this, into human health with you and into nutrition, because I know that's a really important topic for you. It's kind of what you've been focusing your life on now. But I think people might shoot me if we don't talk a little about MMA.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about MMA.
I'm sure you're tired of it by now. But man, to me, like, you're one of the heroes of the sport. Looking back, on those days when you first got started, I think that's my favorite era of MMA. The Japanese era of MMA, Pancrase, Pride. I'd really love to hear some old Roppongi stories or old Pride stories.
Well, it was just a unique time in history, like you were saying, to walk into the Tokyo Dome and see, 60,000, 70,000 people. That's pretty wild stuff, man. Pretty cool stuff. So, yeah, it was incredible. It was really incredible over there, and had a lot of trips to Japan. Over here we were bastardized. We were the black sheep of athletics. There were even most martial artists at that time were saying, what you guys are doing is not martial arts. And I would look at them and say, wait a minute. So boxing, kickboxing, and wrestling aren't martial arts? And they're like, no. And I go, listen, I've got a 5th degree black belt in Shoreiru karate. Doesn't mean I'm going to use it all in a real fight. Because if you aren't adapting and incorporating things that work in a myriad of different situations, you're fooling yourself. It's like a religion, right? when people fall into a belief system, it's hard for them to come up out of that, to question their own beliefs, right? So there's guys out there that were Olympic wrestlers, and that's what they identified as, an Olympic wrestler, instead of saying, you know what, I probably should get pretty good at boxing, just in case I can't get a takedown, right? Things like that. So that's that was my mindset going into it. And so that's, I went off on a tangent here, but ultimately it comes down to just questioning your beliefs and always looking at your weaknesses and doing your best to shore up all the weaknesses you can.
And so in those early days, why do you think there was this resentment from the traditional martial artists toward MMA? Because, we kind of, like you say, we found out what works. That was the beauty of MMA, because for hundreds and hundreds of years, we didn't really know what worked in combat. You had all these traditional martial artists like that telling you they could do the Denmark, the death touch, you see stuff like that constantly. And you're like, these guys are badasses. And then you see them get absolutely wrecked in the early days of MMA.
Well, so for instance, my karate training, I grew up wrestling. I boxed when I was a teenager a little bit, went back into a lot of boxing, training in the boxing gym for kickboxing and MMA. But the karate training that I got was designed for the Okinawan Islanders to defend themselves against the Japanese soldiers that would come on the island. So the sais, kamas, nunchucks, those were all farming tools. And they had to convert farming tools into weapons. Their stances, the horse stance, stepping across themselves, moving laterally side to side, was designed to be able to fight people on footbridges coming from both directions. And also back in those days, it was considered disrespectful to punch your opponent in the face. You could kick him in the head, but you couldn't punch him in the head. So that's why they would pull their fist back upside down to their side when they fought, because they weren't worried about defending their head. So some of the stuff actually works really well. So those stances work well. If I had to defend myself in a hallway or on an airplane, it's going to work really well with people coming from both directions. I could do some things with people. But pulling my hands back to here is going to get me KO'd in the first 20 seconds of a real fight, right? So it's just, you got to pick and choose what's usable, and not associate your whole fiber and all of your being with just one frame of thought and one style, right? I want to be dangerous in every way possible, is the way people should think, right? And so the traditional martial artists who invested their entire life into that one art and walking around a karate tournament with their gi pulled up and flexing their chest like a badass, running katas and stuff, all of a sudden we're dealing with the reality that there are some scary son of a bitches walking the planet who can pull their arms off.
And it's funny, being a jiu-jitsu guy, I'd never really thought about it that way, because there's a tendency, being in the MMA world, to, look down a little bit on traditional martial arts. And I think it's because of that rivalry. But, I never thought about it from the perspective of that's not what this was designed for. It's not designed for one-on-one combat. And it made me, when you were telling me about that, it made me think of the Book of Five Rings. That was a huge part of my evolution as a martial artist. And,
right.
Miyamoto Musashi would talk all the time in that book about, if you're fighting in a hallway, do this. If you're fighting in a room with this many people, do this. It's about combat. It's not just about us. I think we look at it from a sportsman's perspective a lot nowadays.
Yeah, well, and it's, I don't know, there's so many elements to mixed martial arts as well. The strength and conditioning, what you have to do aerobically and anaerobically in your training to be able to, after a battle on the ground and your muscles are out of oxygen, being able to scramble back to your feet and all of a sudden switch gear back to an aerobic activity is like throwing punches and kicks. There's an art to finding that dialing that body, and each person's body is different. Some are stronger than others. Some have better aerobic capacity than others. So it's finding the balance in each individual athlete is something that I had to figure out over 30 years, whatever, in coaching and also for myself. Then you've got to put together all the elements of all the different types of arts and different skill sets involved. And, it's a race against time to win a world title before your body runs out of the energy and being in your prime, being able to pull that off, right?
And, that brings me to something else I wanted to ask you about, because you founded probably the most iconic MMA team of all time. And I can tell by listening to all your interviews if you're such an intelligent guy, cerebral person. Was this something, the Miletich Fighting System, was that something that you just started putting together throughout your career and were like, this is the way we do it now?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's things that can be dialed and improved, but it came down to proper nutrients, number one, which most people have no clue about in this country. The proper nutrients that fuel the cell, the individual cell, which fuels then combine the entire body, which gives you the aerobic, like the endurance to be able to do things, the strength, the recovery, all of that. And then the work ethic, right? Not a lot of people have the work ethic to go into a gym twice a day and torture themselves. It's not something that not many people, are capable of doing that and having that mindset. So it's that, along with recognizing that it's a blessing that I wasn't a national champion in college in wrestling. That would have convinced me that what more did I need? I can out wrestle everybody, and I never would have won a world title, right? So, recognizing that I wasn't the best wrestler helped me recognize that I better be at least pretty damn good at everything else so that I can survive.
And you mentioned winning that world title, and you've told a pretty iconic story on Rogan's podcast. And you said when you were on that title run, you put a 9mm in your drawer and said, if I don't win this belt, then I'm done. I think most people would think, well, that's absolutely insane. But, we've talked a little bit about some of the stuff I've been through. Like, I could totally relate to it. Like, that's the mentality I was in when I first started competing. Like, I thought, this is it. This is everything to me.
Well, it's just at that time in my life, I kind of had enough of just not being handed a great deck of cards, so to speak, right? And so I just made the decision that I was just going to go for it. I put everything into it and put myself in a corner, so to speak, and decided I was going to win a world title, and for me at that time in my life is what was needed.
And it seems like, when I read about your story and hear you talk about it, I don't think it was like a plan to go into MMA. It almost seems like you jumped into it out of desperation. You dropped out of school because your mom was sick and you needed money.
Yeah, I started fighting to make money, and had 3 jobs at the time, and just you're doing anything you can. That immigrant mentality, right? The immigrant mentality has to be there, and so it's something that I still have. Like I want to accomplish things in life. I want to help people along the way, raise as many chips as I can with me, and improve people's lives. That's why we're here. And I'm looked at by a lot of people I can be very harsh at times. I can be in people's faces at times when they need to have their ass chewed about what they're doing to other human beings. And so it's, I'm not liked by everybody. I can tell you that.
Well, I think you've got a bit of a reputation in the sport as not taking any bullshit. Like, I mean, you've clashed with guys like Dana White, and I think he's a guy that tends to clash with guys that don't take any shit. I mean, Stipe is another example. He's never liked Stipe. Maybe he just hates Croatians.
Well, I don't know if it's that. He's just he's just a guy that, he's got a lot of money, he's got a lot of power, and if you don't agree with him, he's got the ability to damage your career, right? And that's just the way it is. And some people will say, dude, just play the game. And I've just never been one that has been very good at playing the game.
And, it's strange to see, some guys like you who you're a hero in this game, you're a pioneer of the sport, and you're not talked about as much. And I think it's because of Dana, and Frank Shamrock, same way, Randy Couture. There are certain guys that have had it out with Dana, and he's hurt their careers because of it.
Sure. Well, and, ultimately, I think that, in a world of alphas, the guy with the deepest pockets, he can kind of do what he wants at times. And, again, I wasn't and will remain not the smartest guy in the room many times, because I do have a problem with people who go out of their way to hurt other people's lives, right?
I don't know, man. I've been listening to your podcast, and the more I listen, the dumber I feel.
Dude, I mean, a lot of things I feel like I've been right about for a lot of years, and I think that as time goes by, it continues to prove that I've been right about a lot of things. But the big picture, what is the big picture? What is the real big picture? And does it come down to, again, what's our purpose here? That's the sort of stuff that I think about.
And you've been wondering that for a lot of years. So what conclusion have you come to?
Well, that I think we have to see that ultimately the people that have had control of this planet all along, certain bloodlines, really don't give a shit about mankind. And that our job is to wake up the rest of mankind, or those who can be woken up, to understand that the only reason there's genocides and wars is because of manipulation, right? That's the only reason.
And it seems like the most evil and corrupt people end up in positions of power. And that's what's scary about it. I told you before we started talking, there's few patriots out there these days. I think you're one of the last. And you told me there were more than I realized.
I'm in constant contact with a lot of great patriots, man. A lot of great people who believe in our Creator and who believe that we're here for a reason. And there's some very, very scary people, very capable individuals, very knowledgeable people.
Speaking of some very scary people, you've built 11 world champions, out of your camp, including one of my favorite fighters of all time, Robbie Lawler, Matt Hughes, Tim Sylvia, Jeremy Horn. My big question for you, I've done a little bit of coaching, and I started a little hole in the wall gym, and it wasn't much, but we had a lot of fun. I could not imagine, though, being a coach and seeing a 17-year-old Robbie Lawler come in, and then you flash forward to now and see what he's done. What's that like?
No, I'm just really happy for him. When he showed up to the gym, he was 16, I believe, at the time. A good friend of mine called me and said, "Hey, I got this kid on the wrestling team. I think it'd be good for him to, in the summers at least, when he's not wrestling or playing football, to be coming down and training with you guys." And I said, "Yeah, bring him down." So I remembered watching Robbie when he was playing flag football and recognizing how good of an athlete he was. So I knew exactly who he was. I watched him, grow up. And so when they brought him in, it was pretty interesting because they came on a Wednesday to watch sparring, and then they went and ran the hills with us. And then Robbie started training with us. And the first day I was going to hold mitts for Robbie to start working with him, I asked him if he was left or right-handed, and he said left-handed. So I trained him as a left-handed fighter. And then years later, we were at a park, a bunch of the guys, and I watched him throw a football with his right hand. And I said, "Dude, you lie." And he started laughing. He knew exactly what I was saying. I go, "Why didn't you tell me you were a left-handed fighter?" He goes, "I wanted to be a southpaw."
That's interesting, though, because, I don't know if you remember Sir Henry Cooper back in the day.
I know who you're talking about, yeah.
He was a left-handed guy, but he fought orthodox, and that's why he had that absolutely crazy lead hand.
Yeah. And that's the thing with Robbie's lead hook will put you to sleep, but his cross, his left-handed cross will put you to sleep too. So
I think, I heard Josh Barnett say something, and it really stuck with me. This was years ago. And he said, there's a whole lot of athletes in this sport now, but there aren't a lot of fighters.
Right.
And I feel like Robbie Lawler is the epitome of that. I mean, when I was preparing for this, the clip of him and Rory popped up, that second fight where he spits blood onto the ground and just stares at him. I was like, that guy's a psychopath.
He's just, the things that he's experienced in his life and the things that the fire that he's walked through makes him a terrifying individual to have to deal with in a combative situation. That's just the way it is. People that have, like I said, I mean, when Robbie was 17, he was beating up world champions in the gym.
That's one thing I thought about when I thought about Miletich. I was watching this little documentary about your camp, and I was thinking, what would it be like there every day? And I just thought, I heard somebody say 1 in 100 stick around. And I think a big problem is ego. I could not imagine what an ego killer walking into a place with that many absolute animals would be like.
Well, that's the thing that I joked around about was my name was on the building, but I got my ass kicked every day.
Was that your plan? You're like, I got to get more training partners.
Originally, yeah, it was. So it's kind of interesting. I started training guys, and I, in my head, started figuring out kind of a conveyor belt system for putting the components, the skill sets in the athletes to make them good as fast as I could. Because yes, I needed training partners, but two, I wanted to prove that I knew how to build monsters, right? And so that was kind of just how I did it, And the building the momentum, the period of educating people on how to do these things, how to eat right, what supplements to take, everything. And then the skill sets, again, takes a while to do. But once that snowball is built and it starts rolling down the hill, it starts to collect and get bigger and bigger and builds momentum. So, that's it's not easy to do, but once you get the snowball going, you can really build a massive snowball of momentum.
And you guys had a hell of a lot of momentum. You had some of the greatest fighters of all time coming through there. And we talked about very scary people. I know one guy you train with, and you've told this story over and over. I won't make you tell it again. I just would like to know, what was it like to train Lee Murray?
He was, the crazy thing is he was very polite when he came to Iowa and stayed here and trained with my team. Very proper, very polite. Yes, sir, no, sir. Conducted himself, as a gentleman. But, I mean, his ground skills weren't great initially, of course, because he came from England. But he could bang. He could bang right away. I mean, he and Robbie sparred with each other several times. And I tell you what, dude, you talk about some ferocity between those two. It was cool to watch.
You have no idea how much money I would pay to see some of those rounds.
I wish I would have got a lot of footage of those days in the training room because it was very intense. It was very intense.
People have kind of forgotten about Lee, people that are, not inside in the sport. And I feel like he's one of those guys.
There's I don't know how many episodes there are, but there's a special coming out about Lee Murray on Showtime Sports. They're gonna be airing that. It might even be on there now. I don't know. I don't watch TV anymore, so I don't know.
I even heard that Guy Ritchie was talking about making a movie about him.
Yeah. I mean, it would make one hell of a movie. I can tell you that.
So my last question about Lee, I heard you say I heard the story on Fight Pass, the Tito Ortiz, Lee Murray fight story. I've heard you tell it on podcast. I know that Tito was drunk and Lee wasn't. And I think we both know that's a factor. How do you think that fight would have went if it would have played out like it was supposed to and Lee would have fought him for that title?
If Tito would have attempted to box with him, sober or not, he would have got knocked out. I can tell you that.
Do you think Tito would have been wise enough to wrestle him?
Oh, I'm sure he would have. But I mean, Lee got very good on the ground as well. I mean, he wasn't going to be able to deal with college wrestling level wrestling. But look, Anderson Silva in his prime really didn't do a whole lot to Lee. Anderson Silva was the one going for takedowns on Lee. That tells you how scary Lee was standing up.
And I'm sure that throughout all your years coaching, there have been a lot of guys like Lee that who could have made it to the absolute top. Is there anybody that comes to mind who are you like, that guy should have been a champion?
Well, Jeremy Horn definitely should have been a champion. I mean, when he was 19, he beat the brakes off of Frank Shamrock up until the last couple minutes of the fight, and Frank did a roll-through knee bar on Jeremy and caught him. But Jeremy, I mean, absolutely dominated him. It couldn't have been more dominating. So, Jeremy definitely should have been a world champ.
People forget about Jeremy a little bit, and he's an absolute legend, and I think he's one of the most intelligent fighters in the game. He's coaching now as well, I know.
Yeah.
But that guy's Jeremy wins over some legends. Forrest Griffin, I think he beat him twice, didn't he?
Yeah, he beat Chael Sonnen 3 times, I believe. He choked Chuck Liddell out in their first fight. He beat a lot of great guys. It's funny, I was on Chael Sonnen's podcast years ago, and this was after Jeremy had already beat him 3 times with triangle chokes and triangle arm bars. And Chael and I were disagreeing on it. Was we were talking. I believe we were having a political discussion, and I was disagreeing with Chael, and Chael was debating me on stuff. And I said, "Listen, dude, you need to stop arguing with me, or I'm going to give Jeremy Horn a call and send him over there." And he's like, "Oh God."
Jeremy had his number.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Chael had a tendency to fall into triangles somehow. I don't know.
I've heard him talk about that. I've heard him say that he started seeing a sports psychologist because of it. He said every fight I would end up getting subbed, like last round, certain minute in, like every fight.
Yeah, it's like he's programmed his mind. It's like when you tell a 4-year-old, don't spill that glass of milk. Don't spill that glass of milk. Don't spill. Oh, shit. You program their mind to actually do what you don't want them to do. When if you would have never mentioned it, the kid doesn't want to spill the milk. Like that's never crossed their mind that they want to spill the milk. But when you continually program their head with that, then they're like, the milk.
So what you're telling me is that Chael Sonnen is a proverbial milk spiller.
Yeah, he programmed himself to fall into triangles. Just incredibly. I mean, I've watched guys fight that will get out of a triangle and just dive right back into one, time and time again, and you just go, how is that even possible?
How do you develop fight IQ? How do you develop, the mental aspect of this game? Is it just time?
Well, yeah, I think an instincts. I mean, you've got to have the instinct and the common sense. And whatever, repetition, of course, right?
And, I really wanted to talk to you. You wanted to talk about human health. And I think it all started with your own story, right? Your body wasn't responding like it should. You were dealing with a lot of health issues. And I think that made you start looking into these things, looking into nutrition, and it changed your life and changed your perspective on life.
Yeah, I just didn't know anything about nutrition. I didn't know anything about supplementation. I didn't know, and as I through my childhood, being severely ill from black mold damage to my respiratory system, and just all kinds of health issues related to that. You're not getting enough oxygen. You're not getting enough nutrients. The human body has to have organic nutrients, and it has to have oxygen, and it has to have clean water. Without those three things at optimal levels, you're going to have problems, period. End of story. And that's something that most humans have no clue about, in this country anyway, because they've just never been educated about those things, right? And so when I was in my early 20s, I decided I wanted to be really good at kickboxing, and I was turning professional, and the doctors couldn't figure out how to get my respiratory system healthy. So I started doing research on what powerful antioxidants I could find that could clean my cells out of the synthetic toxins and molds and heavy metals and all that stuff, so that once my cells were operating correctly, that would address my health issues. And so once I found those products, got on those products, it took only 10 days to heal my respiratory system. And so
10 days made a difference that you hadn't had in years.
10 days changed my life. 10 days made the light bulb go on in my head. I was able to spar for 12 rounds effortlessly with high-level fighters.
So what is it that you started doing?
Started taking antioxidants, high-grade organic substances that have the ability to increase oxygen in the cells and remove the toxins that don't belong in the cells, and feed the mitochondria, which is the furnace of the cell, which creates energy in the cell, which creates energy in your entire body, which then all of that stuff combined allowed me to go from, running 3 miles and suffocating the entire time to running, 16.5-minute 5Ks and bench pressing 365 pounds and dunking a basketball and winning a world title.
So it was before your title run that you started figuring this stuff out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a long time before. Yeah. And that's what allowed me to become, then training was a blast. I wasn't getting tired. I wasn't suffocating. I wasn't struggling. I was in no pain. I didn't have, imagine spending your entire life breathing through a straw that was full of mucus. That's not fun, right?
And you say it was all caused, or most of it was caused by being exposed to black mold when you were younger. Black mold, synthetic chemicals, heavy metals, all of it. Yeah. And I know something you talk about on the Conspiracy Farm podcast a lot is a lot of the illnesses that we're dealing with might be caused by these things. They might not be genetic.
Well, that's the thing, is we have to think, when I look at a plant and why a plant gets sick, it's always the environment, right? So think about this. When they genetically modified corn or beans, they genetically modified them so they wouldn't die from exposure to herbicides, which kill the weeds around them, right? But when you genetically modify something, there's some alterations that don't end up, on the good side of things. So if we could grow everything organic and replenish the nutrients and the microbes in the soil on a continuous basis, we wouldn't have to genetically modify any grains, right?
So the big thing really instead is soil health.
Soil health, water health, air health, yes. And but the thing is why are they talking about genetically modifying human beings? Why would I want to have my DNA altered in any way, shape, or form when that's the signature of my creator, right? So what I found is that I personally, so far in life, have figured out a way at 57 years old that I don't need to be on any products, medicines, to stay healthy. because I learned in my early 20s that there is a different way, right? There's a totally different way of doing things, and the original way of doing things, of how to stay healthy.
And, you know, that's something I really wanted to talk about. I told you a little of my story. You know, I dealt with depression from a really young age, you know, from as far back as I could remember. So about 13 years old, I went to see a psychiatrist. I spent about 10 minutes in there talking to him, and he put me on SSRIs. He put me on sleeping pills. And the next 10 years of my life, nothing but that. Nothing ever helped. And so I felt like a science experiment. I bet I was on 40 different medicines for all through my teenage years. And I'll tell you, they were a nightmare.
Yeah.
And ended up, they put me on Adderall toward the end for my depression. I thought, well, that seems strange, but I went with it. And it ended with me hanging myself. I ended up in a coma, almost died. They told me I'd never fight again. They said I'd probably never talk again, traumatic brain injury, all that. But here we are. And since then, I've not been on anything.
You seem pretty normal to me, bud.
My entire life changed.
Yeah.
I feel normal. I feel different. And you look back and you think, maybe there wasn't that much wrong with me. Maybe I was just a confused kid like a lot of kids are, and I wasn't too happy with my life.
Well, here's the thing. You know, we have to have a purpose, right? There has to be purpose in our life. And there's a lot of people that they've become lost. And sometimes it takes, you know, a lot of suffering to figure out your purpose, right? And that's something that some of us make it through, some of us do not make it through, right? And that's just kind of the unfortunate part of it, to say the least. Thank God you made it through it. But through my own suffering, you know, a childhood of being sick, and, you know, there was obviously some abuse involved as well, that I have, by the time that I've reached my 50s, now I understand what my real purpose is, and that's to, you know, just help people escape the misery of health issues, you know, and just help them go in the right direction, so to speak. And that's really through your suffering. That's why we're talking, you know, people who have been through those similar things. And there's a lot of people who have lived lives that haven't really involved a whole lot of suffering, and they'll probably never unlock or have the desire to unlock the things that we have, right? Spiritually, physically, mentally, all those different things. So that's kind of just the way that I see things anyway. The wisest people I've ever talked to are people who have suffered a great deal, you know, and have made it through it.
I think that's what appealed to me about MMA and fighting. You know, I got into this sport not knowing anything about it. I never watched MMA growing up. I was a nerd, you know, and my friend, it took him a year and a half to convince me to try jiu-jitsu. That's the only thing that ever changed anything for me. That's the reason I'm still alive.
Yeah.
And what I found was a group of people who are absolute savages, but they're the kindest, most empathetic people I've ever met. And it's because a lot of fighters have been through absolutely devastating things.
Sure. And that's the thing is, you know, you listen to combat veterans and that saying that they have of, you know, they had to be and experience massive levels of violence to become as kind as they are, you know, because there's a lot of really, really well-trained, very, very dangerous people that walk around us and they act like normal people, but, you know, they're capable of massive amounts of violence, right? But you know, they don't want that. They put that guy away a long time ago, you know, and I respect combat veterans more than anybody on this planet because of the shit they've been through, you know.
Well, you know, I heard Jocko Willink talking about that, and he said, the world I've seen is a very dark place. And you got to be a light in that darkness. I think a lot of people who haven't seen that darkness don't realize that and how important it is.
Well, and that's the thing we're seeing in this country right now is the amount of hatred and, you know, the cancel culture and doing horrible things to other human beings and ruining their lives. And, putting their families in poverty and making their kids suffer and things like that because of their political ideologies and all this other stuff. The people that are willing to do that to other human beings have never experienced like what can come from that, and not understanding the history of that, right? Of the backlash that causes. Eventually, when a group of people are so oppressed and so, just abused, that when they've had enough, man, you better find a hole and hide in that son of a bitch, because they're coming.
I think that, my generation, it's a softer generation. I mean, we've not had to deal with a lot of the things our past generations have. Those guys went to war. Our grandfathers were fighting world wars. And now we have pretty easy lives. Technology's unbelievable. But I think we've lost sight of a lot of things. We don't remember the gulags. We don't remember the concentration camps. We don't remember what happens when you allow tyranny to spring forth.
It's modernity. Modernization, modernity ruins masculinity. It ruins toughness. It ruins grit. All those things. I don't have to get in a covered wagon and go, God, I want to go west and have a farm, that's going to take me 2 weeks in a covered wagon, and God forbid a wheel falls off of it and I have to figure out how to build a new one or fix it. Modernity makes us soft. It really does. And that's the thing is, I admit on numerous occasions that, my years of fighting and coaching, I was very intense, and I had the mindset, no matter what setback it was, I didn't care. Like, I was just going to overcome it. And then I started doing broadcasting. And when you're what they call the talent on a broadcast, the person that's on camera, they take you out to 5-star restaurants. They feed you lobster and steak. They, all kinds of this stuff. And it makes you soft. So now, for the past couple of years, I've deliberately slept on the floor just to toughen myself back up.
It reminds me of There Will Be Blood. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
No,
He's main character, Daniel Plainview, old oil man. He sleeps on the floor like that.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable at times, but, life's uncomfortable, right?
Well, I think sometimes you need to be reminded of it. I think that's why we suffer. I mean, there wouldn't be any joy in life if there weren't rude shocks, if things didn't fall apart.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
And
so, I'm sitting here in my truck in front of the pizza ranch, and everybody's going in there and eating. And I'm not saying, the quality of food isn't the best for your health, right? So with the combination of just being able to stop and eat lunch and eat a bunch of freaking gluten, which I used to be the guy that went, oh boy, gluten intolerant, all this stuff. Well, I eventually had blood tests done on me, and I had gluten, such a high gluten allergy that the guy that did the blood tests on me, who's a retired Marine and a really bright guy, looked at me and he goes, you'll be dead in 3 years from a heart attack if you don't stop eating it. And it was manifesting in joint pain, severe joint pain and arthritis. And I didn't know it. I just wasn't paying attention, right? And so for the most part, I quit eating gluten, and, that helped me a lot. There's a lot of people that eating gluten ends up in, severe digestive issues.
We're clearly not supposed to be eating so much bread all the time, but people, that's all.
That and pasta, right? That and pasta. If people cut out drinking whatever you call it, soda pop, whatever, and eating pasta and bread, like literally 90% of their health issues would go away.
It's interesting though. It's what we talked about. That's what's going on with this country though. Pizza's killing us. Fast food's killing us. Facebook's killing us. Our lives are so comfortable. But this country was built by hard-handed men who asked nothing for nothing. Like they built this country with sweat and blood, and it wasn't easy. And now things are just so easy. And I think that's why we're dealing with a mental health crisis. That's why so many young men don't know what to do with their lives. And it's because like everything's so easy. We're supposed to be striving for a goal. We're supposed to, you know, the call to adventure. I read a lot of Joseph Campbell. Like that's a huge part of the human story.
Yeah.
Is to do something dangerous.
And go out into the woods, man. Go out into the woods and freaking camp and hike and, you know, get yourself in good enough shape where you can, you know, walk up a 14,000-foot mountain in Colorado. You know, there's people that, you know, one of my favorite things that I've ever done in my life was hiking up 14,000-foot mountains and then running back down them. You know, I watched a guy run. Guy had to be 65 years old. And I was hiking up the tallest mountain in Colorado. And I was looking back at him. I could see this speck, tiny speck, but I could tell he was running. And I don't know if you've ever run up a 14,000-foot mountain or run on a 14,000-foot mountain, but that shit is, it's tough. I mean, that's about as tough as it gets. So I'm watching this guy. I keep turning around, and I'm seeing him running, and then he runs past us. And he runs up to the peak while we're still on our way up. And I'm in pretty good shape at the time, mind you. We're not running up the mountain because in 2 weeks we're supposed to be doing the Leadville 100, which is 100 miles through those mountains in a day, basically. And the guy on his way down is throwing rocks off the trail. He's clearing the trail while he's running back down the mountain. And he stops to talk to us. And I go, do you run ultra marathons? And he goes, no. He goes, I've just been running mountains my entire life. So I just love running mountains. This guy's 65 years old. He's not even breathing hard. And he just got done running up the tallest mountain in Colorado. And I'm going, seeing these types of people, you recognize that there are real X-Men walking the planet. Like there's people that I've seen at the gym that I used to train at walk around with 1,100 pounds on their shoulders, walking around with it, 1,100 pounds. And then seeing 65-year-olds that can run 100 miles through high altitude mountains, over mountain passes and back down. And I've had people grab a hold of me that are so unbelievably strong that it's beyond belief. And these people actually exist because they have the organic nutrients and have developed their entire lives with organic nutrients in their bodies. And that's the true cellular power that we have to have, right? And it's pretty cool to see.
So tell me, you know, as someone who has a very limited understanding of this stuff, how do we get started on the path? Like, how do we go about changing our lives, learning more about, you know, nutrition?
Try to grow your own food. Dig into organic and biological farming or gardening, whatever. Don't use synthetic chemicals, petroleum-based fertilizers, pesticides and herbicides in your garden. Don't use any of it. It's all toxic, period. You know, that's pesticides, for instance. A company called IG Farben in Germany produced a pesticide that they used in the gas chambers to kill all the Jews. Now, fast forward, Bayer, which is a German company, they still exist, that were part of IG Farben. Many think that they just changed their name. Have bought companies like Monsanto. Those are the pesticides and herbicides, you know, that are being sprayed on our crops. You know, it's not what you want in your water or your food. It's not what you want in your body. You know, you've got to be able to eat organics that you've grown yourself, or you trust the person, the farmer or the grower 100% with your life. And that's the food you should be eating. And then your water. I mean, go look at the local water company in your area. And then you can hunt down the water tests for the chemicals and the amounts of chemicals that exist in your water. Not even just the pharmaceuticals. because the pharmaceuticals aren't breaking down. They're ending up in our water as well. All the pharmaceuticals that all these 70% of Americans are dumping in their body are ending up in their toilets and in our water, right? So you got pharmaceuticals, you got the other synthetic chemicals from agriculture, from manufacturing, from cleaning solvents in your house. Everybody's putting it on their yard if they don't want dandelions, all this other stuff. So just the water here in my area in eastern Iowa is so bad that just one chemical called atrazine, which is a herbicide, is at levels way above where it should be. And atrazine has been proven to not only destroy the testosterone levels of lab rats and frogs, but male lab rats and frogs actually grow female genitalia. And that's
so
what's
that's the whole Alex Jones turning the frogs gay thing.
Yeah, he just didn't explain it the way it should have been explained. So when we see the feminization of boys and men around us, that's what's happening. They're drinking the water, they're eating the food, eating soy, these estrogen mimickers or, hormonal disruption, these chemicals, and it's destroying people. And then they use the mental aspect of it and say, toxic masculinity. No, actually, it's really, really important to be super strong, super masculine, and be a protector.
Well, that's the thing. I think this modern idea has come about that strong men are dangerous. We wouldn't be here without strong men.
Right. Yeah. And so if they can take the warriors out by just feminizing them, there's nobody left to fight. Right.
And so how do we fight it? How do young men of this generation fight it?
Get water purification systems if you can afford them. And I mean, reverse osmosis, there's water purification systems out there. If people do research, some of them $2,000 and up. They're not cheap, $1,500, stuff like that. But they'll remove the synthetics and the heavy metals out of your water, so that you're not being affected by that. And then again, using high grade organic supplements that give you the best chance at health, and then eating organic food, right? So when you walk into a grocery store, when you go to the produce section, there's what's on those. It's called a PLU code. It's a hashtag with a 4 or 5 digit number on it. If it doesn't start with the number 9, it's not organic. Don't put it in your body, period. Because, I mean, if somebody said, hey, do you want to drink this tiny little amount of pesticide or herbicide every day? Here, I'm going to put it in a tiny little cup for you and just take a sip every day. You'd go, hell no, absolutely not. But that's what's happening.
And I feel like there's a lot of everyday products people are using too that are absolutely toxic for you, dangerous for you, like processed foods, things like that. I guess stay away from them as well.
Yeah, if you can do it, and if you put enough organic nutrients into your body, your cells are satisfied and they're healthy, and they're not signaling your stomach that you're hungry. So you'll eat a lot less if you're putting organics in your body.
And these organic nutrients, I know I've heard you talk about, they have healing properties as well.
Well, we can't say that they can heal anything. We can say that they give your body the best chance at cellular mitochondrial function, which could result in a better overall situation for yourself physically, right?
And your last podcast, some very intelligent conversation going on that I didn't fully understand, but you were talking about fighting cancer with some of these things, and
it's the main thing is this. Main thing is this: is that there is nothing on the planet that can be claimed to cure cancer, right? We can't make it. Nobody can claim that. It's just not allowed. All I have done is done my best for my children and myself to put high-grade organic supplements in my body to reduce my chances of cells going rogue on me and causing health issues. Right? So that's the thing is, by not eating gluten, wheat, and soy, I don't have the inflammation in my body that causes. By putting the best organics in my body, to keeping my cells clean, or as clean as I can anyway, of proper cellular function. That's all I can do. That's all I can do. And generally, when people do the same thing, they generally find a higher level of health and endurance.
And you talked about something earlier before we started recording, and your two passions are health, but not only that, you tie it in with spirituality. You talk about that being important. So what aspect does that play in your life?
If I don't have my health, I don't have anything. All I'm thinking about is I can't breathe, or I'm in too much pain to walk, or I can't even hold a job because for whatever reason, my physical ailments are causing me so many problems. I'm on disability. I've been taken out of the game. I've been taken out of the game of life. I'm sitting at home watching TV on disability payments, and I don't serve a purpose in this world, right? So if we can teach people what they should be putting in their bodies to get themselves in a better position health-wise, what else can they accomplish in their life? And how can they help other people? And how can they multiply that by a positive impact on society? That's really what it's all about, And again, I just give my example of learning how to heal myself and becoming a world champion, and then being able to help others create a bunch of world champs and get a bunch of guys and gals into TV televised careers. And now all of a sudden I'm getting calls from law enforcement and then military, and I'm teaching them how to defend themselves in hand-to-hand situations, what they should be eating, what supplements they could be taking to keep themselves healthy so that they're better in their position, in their job. And all the other things that I've been able to do are only because I solved the riddle myself, right? And so I try to urge people to just reach out to knowledgeable people who know and understand what true nutrition is. And that vitamin of the bottle of vitamin minerals on the shelf in the store is generally 95% of the time synthesized vitamins and minerals that come from rocks, not plants. And you're not only not going to absorb them, if you do absorb some of it, it's going to damage you.
Pat, you're such an interesting guy. After your fighting career, I think we see a lot of fighters who that's everything to them. They never move on and they don't have any other interests, but you're doing all this interesting stuff. What caused that? And did you just feel like it's over for me now and I don't feel as fulfilled in MMA? It's time for me to branch out? Or is it something you've always been this passionate about?
Once I started figuring out the big picture after my health changed and I was able to accomplish things, and you spend a life kind of, if you think about it, as an athlete, I spent my professional career ruining other people's dreams. And then as a coach, I was coaching athletes to go ruin other people's dreams, right? And after a while, you think, what good am I doing in the world shitting all over everybody else's dreams? Where training with ultra runners, it's about making sure that everybody finishes. They want to see you finish. I remember I was the one always struggling on long runs with my friends who are incredible ultra runners. They'll run 100 miles and their facial expression doesn't even change. Where I'm sweating so badly and suffering from dehydration and all kinds of issues, where I'm laying in the front yard of a farmer's house on a gravel road, and they're hosing me down with the farmer's hose, trying to cool my body down because I'm suffering from heat stroke. And then getting me back up and getting me to finish the 50-mile run on a 95-degree day. So it's like the compassion switch, goes on, and you just, you want to correct, I guess, as much of the wrongs as you've done in life as before you go,
I could not even imagine what it's like doing those long distance runs like ultra marathoners. I've always hated running. It terrifies me just to think about it.
Well, what you want to do, this is a good way to get over it. Get a backpack with the water bladder in it, right? Camelback or whatever, or get a vest with a couple bottles of water, and there's a couple places you can stop on the way back to get electrolytes. Bring electrolytes with you, whatever you need to do, along with fluids and a little bit of food if you need it, and have somebody drive you 20 miles out away from your house, and you make it back.
Well, it's funny you say that, Pat, because I told you I went through some hard times, almost died and stuff. Well, before that, I was a fighter. I was just getting started, and I was going through a really hard time in my life. Though I was homeless, didn't have a car, and I live in rural Appalachia. You can't get anywhere without a car. So I would walk 2.5 hours every day to go to the gym, 2.5 hours home most days.
Wow.
And nothing made me stronger. Like, I never knew what it would take mentally to go through that. And I think that's the reason I made it through my fight. Nothing was going to stop me after going through all that.
That's amazing, dude. That's you need to be, that's the thing. You need to be giving speeches. You need to be going to schools and talking. You need to be helping, kids and telling them your story, because we don't know what kind of dark places people are in, especially kids right now. With the way the world has gone sideways, they need to hear from people like you.
You talk about human potential. You talk about these X-Men, people doing these amazing things. I never knew what I was capable of until I had to do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's it, man. That's it. And that's, it's like, tell you this story. So I used to do an instructor's course for my affiliate schools that I used to have. So the owners and instructors of these martial arts gyms would come. They would train with me for a week. They would go through all my basic classes. They would train with my fight team. And I had a guy who owned a gym out east come in my office about 3 days into the training, and he goes, "Dude, I can't tell my members to do the endurance stuff you're telling your people to do." And I go, "Why's that?" And he goes, "Because they'll quit." And I go, "Really?" I go, "Well, how come my people aren't quit?" He goes, "I don't know." He goes, "But this is insane." I go, "Really? Is it insane?" I go, "Your students don't know what they're capable of unless you tell them what they're capable of. They have to be told what they're capable of. There's no other way, because they're afraid, just like you're afraid. You're going through this. Well, you're still alive. You're back for another day of training, and you've gone through it for a couple of days. What makes you think your members aren't as tough as you? Like, why would you think you're special?" And he's like, "Okay, I'll do it." And so he went back and he called me, I don't know, a week or two later. And he goes, "Oh my God, my members love me." Because you tell them, you just go, "Listen, this is what we're doing. If you need to take a break because you're going to puke or you need a drink of water, do it. I'm not going to scream at you. But eventually, it's not going to make you that tired. You're going to be used to being tired, but you've built up the endurance where it's just normal for you. And you can do it." You know what I mean?
I guess it's that David Goggins embrace the suck mentality. Like, when I started, I weighed 270. I was severely overweight, really depressed. That year that I was doing all that stuff, I lost 100 pounds. And it was just like, that's all I did. That's all I cared about doing. Right. That was my life. I didn't want to work. I didn't want to do anything but that.
Yeah. And what do you do for you? Maybe you should, because it's such beautiful country out there in Kentucky, maybe you should start running. Huh?
I definitely would consider it, but there's a lot of dangerous drivers around here, man. A lot of meth heads around here running around.
Well, that's why you run on the opposite side of the road so you can see the traffic coming at you.
Smart. This is a guy who's done it before.
Yeah. So I saw a guy get hit on a bike one time because he was riding with traffic, not against it, on a country road.
I think I was at least smart enough to know that during my walking days. It was like, you got to walk on this side or you're going to die. We don't have sidewalks here, buddy.
Right. Yeah. Well, if you got to run off into the grass a little bit, do it.
Oh, something I wanted to ask you. You're from Bettendorf, Iowa. You're a small town guy just like me.
Right.
What was it like turning Bettendorf into the MMA mecca of the world at one point?
It was honestly, it was kind of just normal because the wrestling pedigree from this part of the country and this town, the wrestling has always been just top notch. And even for the state of Iowa, we're known, to have really good wrestling program. So for me, I got asked this question when I was UFC champion, and the guy interviewing me goes, "What's it like to be one of the toughest human beings on the planet, one of the greatest fighters?" And I go, "I gotta be honest with you, I'm about the 30th toughest guy in my town." I mean, there were guys that I idolized, growing up that were just a year or two older than me that I absolutely would no way, shape, or form want to get into a fight with them. I mean, a lot of tough guys came out of this area, the Davenport, Bettendorf, this part of Iowa, and just, so a lot of pretty scary individuals and great wrestlers.
I've heard Chael talk about that as well. I've heard him talk about the baddest dudes he's known, and a lot of them old school wrestlers. One of them was Mark Schultz that he mentioned.
Mark and Dave Schultz and the Dan Gables of the world and all that sort of stuff. I mean, you think about Dan Gable in college could beat everybody on his team. Then as a coach into his 40s, he could beat everybody on the team. Royce Alger, after winning the Freestyle World Championship, came back to the University of Iowa to the wrestling room, and Gable goes, "Hey, get your wrestling shoes on. Let's get a workout in." And Gable proceeded to beat the living shit out of the reigning Olympic or world freestyle champion, who was 30 pounds bigger than him. And Gable was in his late 30s, early 40s. And Alger said it was and all the guys that wrestled for Gable back in those days said it was just a horrifying experience to have him grab a hold of you and just run you into the ground and kick your ass. I mean, there's levels, right? And I've been up in that wrestling room and just, dude, that's when you realize there are levels.
And, I think you might be the baddest guy that I know. You and Jeff Monson might have to fight it out. He's my buddy too, but I got to know. I heard Chael answer that question. Who are the baddest guys you've ever known?
God, there's been so many of them, to be honest with you. I mean, the Brian McCracken, two-time All-American heavyweight wrestler, two-time state Iowa wrestling champion, amazing football player, got a degree in as a Russian linguist, was a SEAL team leader, guys like that, from my hometown. Like in his prime, in the UFC, had he been taught how to box and do submissions, would just, in his prime, would absolutely smash people.
And, I never, I'm dumb. I never put the connection together between Iowa and wrestling. And that's, so you had constantly young bodies coming in there, I'm sure, that were just incredible wrestlers.
Yeah, most of them had a lot of wrestling experience, and there were others that did not, but obviously they picked up a lot of wrestling skills from being in the room with those guys every day. We did martial arts training like a wrestling team, right?
What's the craziest Miletich Fighting System training story you can remember?
I mean, there's a lot of them. I mean, people having mental breakdowns during practice. People, when we'd go and run the hill, we'd spar 10 or 12 rounds on a Wednesday night, and then we'd throw on our running shoes and go run a hill, an eighth of a mile hill, straight up and down, over and over. Guys puking, guys laying in the
Did
grass
you ever
crying.
have trouble with like gym beefs between some of these absolute monsters? Because you had world champions in there. I'm sure there was a lot of ego.
Every once in a while, yeah, there would be problems. I mean, when Sam Hoger arrived, because he had been on the Ultimate Fighter show, and he asked if he could come up and train with my team for his fight on the final show or whatever. I said, yeah, come on up, whatever. So he arrived to the gym, and everybody was doing strength and conditioning in the morning, and he walked in, introduced himself to me, and then he walked up to Tim Sylvia in front of me, and he said, Tim Sylvia, how you doing? I'm Sam Hoger. I'm here. And it was a Wednesday when he got there. And that was our hard sparring night. And he says to Tim Sylvia, he says, I'm going to knock you out tonight. And Tim's the reigning UFC champ. And Tim looks at him and he goes, you're kidding, right? And Sam goes, no, I'm absolutely going to knock you out tonight. And so Sam learned a lesson that evening. Sam got KO'd in practice and learned a bit of a lesson about not running your mouth. But so that stuff happened now and then.
Tim Sylvia, that's a man that I think people have forgotten a little bit. He was one of the baddest heavyweights of all time. When he was in his prime there, when he beat Rico, my God, that guy was scary.
Yeah, if he hit you solid, you were gonna get put to sleep. That's for sure.
And he was really tough to take down as well. Like his takedown defense was excellent. He's so big.
Yeah,
yeah. What was that guy like in the training room?
He's just a very hard worker. Just a very hard worker, and he turned on a switch though when he fought, and he became a different human being when he fought. Like totally different guy. And
throughout his career, it almost seemed like he was the kind of guy, like it seemed like he had a lot of self-doubt.
Well, everybody's got self-doubt at times, right? I mean, right before you're walking out to fight, on pay-per-view TV, there's a lot of things can happen.
Yeah.
You've experienced walking out and fighting. You know the thoughts that go through your head, like, the what ifs can start to enter your head. But once you get in there and, initial contact is made, you just go into automatic mode, so to speak, act and react, and it becomes instinctual. So, but he had self-doubt, and it's easy to have self-doubt when you get your ass kicked in the room by your teammates, right? But if you don't have teammates that are kicking your ass when you're making mistakes, you're never going to learn and get better. So it's kind of interesting how, your buddies, your best friends, your buddies will kick your ass to make you better, to show you how much they love you, right?
Well, I see that on a local level. I work in, regional MMA, and you see a lot of these guys, they're the best guy in the gym, and they're happy with that. They don't want to go anywhere else. Right. And they don't really go anywhere because of it.
Fear holds everybody back,
There's an old German proverb I like. It's fear is bigger than the wolf.
Well, that's the thing and that's the saying that I have, which is similar. The wolf is always scarier at night when you can't see him. Right? That's the it's just confronting your fears as much as you can,
And, it makes me think of something else, talking about these local fighters that won't travel and won't go to bigger gyms. There's a big problem, around West Virginia, Kentucky, with these coaches who will not let guys grow, will not let guys move to other gyms because they'll see a guy with talent and they latch onto him. They want that glory.
Yeah, well, that's insecurity, right? So that's a traditional martial artist mentality as well, where, it's the Cobra Kai dojo of mental, psychological you know, controlling cult-like belief systems, all that sort of stuff. And I mean, when my fighters would say, "Hey, I'm going to be out in Vegas next week, going out there and visiting family or whatever, you know, what gym do you think I should go train at?" And I'd say, "Well, there's a bunch of good ones out there. Try this one and this one, you know." And they'd come back and go, "No, they got some really, really good jiu-jitsu skills, but they don't even freaking train hard. Like, those guys don't even know how to train hard. They'll roll for like 20 minutes, and then they'll sit around and talk for 10, and then they'll start rolling again, and then they'll talk some more." And I go, "Yeah, you know, they don't do it like we do here. We're psychopaths."
So walk me through a day in the life at Miletich Fighting Systems.
Well, I mean, the morning was generally technique, strength and conditioning stuff. You know, that's kind of what we would do. And then throughout the day, different guys, you know, would come in, you know, to work on skill sets, whatever. And then, of course, some guys who needed to work on their fundamentals would even come to the basic, like, kickboxing class, Thai pad class, stuff like that, a lot of that. And then they would go into the fight training, whether it was wrestling, grappling, sparring, whatever we were working on that night. And then, of course, there was always conditioning at the end of practice, you know, always.
And so, are you still coaching anymore? Or are you still?
No,
still
I didn't. I
retired.
retired from coaching years ago, just because I was so busy with you know, broadcasting, training law enforcement, military, and all of that I was never going to see my kids. Even when I was in town, I didn't see my kids because they were always in bed by the time I got home. So I just like, I got to the point where I was like, I've got to push something off my plate. Reached all my goals as a coach and an athlete, so it's just time to call it quits.
So when you see guys like Jeremy Horn, you know, go out, he's got his own place. He's training young fighters. I think Rothwell was with you too, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He's got his own place. He's doing really well. You know, Robbie's doing great. Is it kind of like watching your kids grow up and get married and stuff?
To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, you know, and hopefully their quality of life has been improved by, you know, all the stuff that we've interacted on and all of that. You know, that's kind of the idea of make your kids certainly better than we were, right?
So ultimately, does that mean more than any of the accolades, any of the titles, like just the fact that their lives were better by being there?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that in the end, like, you know, I don't give a shit about, you know, the road to getting to winning a UFC title. It was the road. It wasn't the belt. It was the road and the experiences and the people and the places, right? You're an accumulation of experiences and observations and interactions and all that stuff, right? That's all we are. Our spirits, you know, interacting with each other while we're here. And doing our best to you know, like again, help each other, right? In one way, shape, or form. And we're all here to learn from each other, bad or good lessons.
And when you look back on everything you've done, because you've done so much, what are you most proud of?
Having kids, man. Having 3 great daughters. You know, my daughters are amazing people. They're super, super wise. They've learned from observing me and others and their mother, and they've good and bad, you know, mistakes that I've made, the good things that I've done, and they paid attention. They're very, very intuitive, and they're very kind. They don't take any shit off people, but they're very kind-hearted, that love to help people as well. So really, that's by far my greatest accomplishment.
And before we go, I know you're a very busy guy, and I appreciate all the time you've given me. You know, I talk to a lot of young fighters who are just getting started in this game.
Right.
Is there any advice you could give them?
Don't do it unless you're going to commit 100%. And when I mean 100%, that means nothing else except the lives and well-being of your loved ones matters more. Because the sport will absolutely chew you up and spit you out if you don't. that fighters, that promoters are pimps and fighters are whores. So if you're going to be a whore, be the most expensive one on the planet and be the best one.
You know, that's an interesting perspective because, like I say, I work on the local level and I see a lot of these guys, they're not all in. They
Right.
half-ass everything they're doing.
A lot of people will do things half-ass and get by in this world. They can hold a job somewhere and half-ass it and get paid. You half-ass MMA and you're eventually going to end up with some severe damage. You know?
Well, just this last weekend, you know, we had an event. One of my friends was fighting. His name's Bobby. He's an Iraq vet, got into the sport. He's over 40 now, but, you know, just got into it, making a go of it. His opponent texted the promoter on the day of the fight. Said, I hope my opponent doesn't mind, but I'm 28 pounds overweight.
It's just complete abandonment of self-responsibility.
And here, Bobby had literally killed himself to cut weight.
Oh, yeah. He looked like he's a veteran. Yeah.
But
and did they end up fighting?
No. What happened was we said, you need to get down here right now. You need to cut, and we need to see you making an effort to cut. And we were trying to get him within 10 pounds because Bobby was ready to go. Bobby wanted to fight.
Yeah.
And the guy said, I'm on my way. I'll be there. He never showed up.
Of course. Yeah.
And
well, that's something that he has to live with the rest of his life, you know?
Well, we had a title fight the same night. And the guy was backstage, started getting nervous, throwing up a little bit. And he's like, I'm not going to do it. I can't handle it. And so his opponent, who had worked his ass off for that title shot, didn't get to fight.
That's the thing, man. Letting other people down, not just yourself, right? So it's, had he gone through with it, and even if he would have lost, he would have been able to sleep that night. He'd been able to look at himself in the mirror, you know.
Well, you know, I made a little bit of a comeback. You know, I never thought I'd fight again. I figured I'm going to do it just because I said I never would. I went and did a couple of boxing matches. And my last one, I took on 2 days' notice. I was way out of shape. And, dude, I was dead. Halfway through round one, I was sick, too. Didn't know what was going on with me, but everything inside of me wanted to quit. Like that little voice in your head, it's like, it's not a big deal. Just give up. I knew I would regret it for the rest of my life if I did, though. And I don't know how I made it through, but I did.
That's it, man. Because you've been through difficult things in your life before, right? Very difficult things. And so you were able to do it. And that's the thing, man. When you've been through difficult stuff, you just seem to be able to cope with it, right? That's why a lot of good ultra runners are in their, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. They've dealt with the ups and downs of life. They've been through, divorces and bankruptcies and tragedy and all that shit. And they can just run for 100 miles and go, well, what's the worst thing can happen to me? If I can die?
Well, it's awesome too, because then you look back on it and you can think, now I know what I'm made of. And it's like, I think about that story you tell about your weight cut with the Shoney Carter fight. I mean, you barely made it through that. And that became one of your biggest highlights through your career.
Yeah, that was not a fun experience. Not a fun experience.
Oh, I couldn't imagine. I could not imagine. And then, but after landing that high kick, I can't imagine the relief that you felt as well.
Yeah, because I could make the down payment on the house I was having built.
It's a funny thing. You're a guy who just goes all in life. Like you did that with the world title. You said, if I don't do this, it's over. You've paid for a house before you got the win money. Like, what kind of self-belief does that take to know I can do it?
I think it's stupidity.
So looking back now, you're just like, man, I was so dumb.
It's a lifestyle of just saying, this is what I got to do to satisfy myself, to be able to sleep at night, whatever, because you set high goals. When you set high goals, there's more pressure in life. I don't know. I'm programmed that way somehow. I don't know why. In a world of, people telling you that you have to have injections of synthetic chemicals and cocktails of science in your body to survive from getting sick, you've got to go against what the entire narrative on the planet is telling you and go within yourself and have a belief system and know, because of all the years and decades of experience, that they're full of shit. Right? That, you know, to me, when the entire world is telling you that you're wrong, but somehow you're not dead, well, you might know what the hell you're talking about.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute honor to talk to Pat Miletich, a legend in the game. Check out the Conspiracy Farm podcast if you want to be really scared about the future.
If you want to be educated. So go to, on Twitter, it's at Conspiracy Farm and then the number 1, at Conspiracy Farm 1 on our Twitter page. And you can shop for our clothing as well, listen to our episodes. And then also, if people want to try a really good supplement that I put together with the guys at Chemical Free Body, they can go to organicsupersoldier.com and give themselves the best chance at, you know, having decent health and athletic performance.
And he's already said he's going to send me some Super Soldier, and he's going to send me some merch.
Well, what we want to do is get you to where you can promote it and get an affiliate code so that you can get it to all your friends. Keep your friends down.
I would absolutely love that. You know,
keep the MMA athletes down in Kentucky operating at optimum level, because I guarantee 99% of them are on supplements that come out of, you know, health food stores that have fillers and chemicals and garbage in them, when they could be putting the actual,
a lot of them,
you know,
man, are not
nutrients.
taking supplements at all. A lot of these local fighters are not caring about their nutrition and their health. That's the step they're missing.
Yeah. No, that's the difference. If the ones that win are the ones that pay attention to all the details. Everybody can train hard, but not everybody knows how to educate themselves about what nutrients they should be putting in their body to actually be able to stand on the gas pedal for 25 minutes and destroy other human beings.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Pat Miletich, you got anything to say before we go?
No, man, just thank you. And thank you for being an inspiration for me, Elijah, and your story, and get out there and start telling people more about it, because people need lights in the darkness right now, buddy.
Well, I believe you're going to make me blush again.
Have a good day, dude.
Pat Miletich.
You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of bird.